In today's history video, we'll go over the month of July 2018, covering the first ever Tanabata celebration, the release of the category Super Idol stages, and what might be one of the best Dokkan Fests of that year. The month of July started with, as you would guess, the first official Tanabata celebration. We did get a special banner the previous year around the same time frame with like a similar theme, but the Tanabata name wasn't mentioned anywhere, and it wasn't even a full-on celebration like this one. The Tanabata celebration had your typical Logan bonus campaign, missions, 2 new banners, as well as a new story event introducing a ton of new characters, the return of the Porunga wishes, and the introduction of the wish strips. The Logan bonus campaign was pretty cracked. It gave a total of 77 stones throughout the entirety of the campaign, as well as a free wish strip, which we'll cover in a second. The missions were also not bad, given a tons of stones, potential orbs, skies, and multiple wish strips. So what were those new wish strips? They were this new item that you could exchange in the Baba shop for one of 77 characters, summonable characters. From what I could remember, the best picks here were AGL Golden Frieza, Physical Gotenks, Strength God Goku, and like maybe Physical Pan, Int Middle Cooler, and Strength Percent Goku. But yeah, as you'd guess, most of these SSRs were pretty bad. But for a new player, this was actually pretty insane. I remember thinking very carefully about my choices back then on Global. I think in the end I just picked 5 copies of Physical Gotenks. Like yeah, Physical Gotenks was just that good. But yeah, even veterans by that point were missing at least one of those SSRs, if not multiple of them, so everyone had at least something they could pick. Unlike today, where I genuinely kid you not, I think I have the whole roster rainbowed. Those wish strips just aren't cutting it anymore, which I'm sure will change this year. After what they did during the 10th year anniversary, there's absolutely no way the wish strips won't have some sort of crazy roster in 2025, but we'll see. As for the Porunga wishes, they were the same as the ones during the 3rd year anniversary, but they only gave 1 round of wishes instead of 3, and the Incredible Gems wish was replaced by wish strips. So yeah, the best 3 wishes were obviously the first 3, which are exactly the ones I chose back then. The headliner of the celebration was none other than Full Power SSJ4 Goku. Tech Full Power SSJ4 Goku introduced the full power category into the game, a category that wasn't half bad. It featured some pretty good characters, but half of them were extreme, so the team was kind of wonky. It had like a lot of powerful characters, but they just didn't link well together. For some reason, it also didn't include a lot of characters who should have been there, like the Angels per Century Gokus, Intuya Goku, like the Majin Vegetas, the Ultimate Gohans, and many more. So yeah, that didn't help either. The category also didn't feature any other Super Saiyan 4 character besides Full Power Super Saiyan 4 Goku, meaning this guy didn't really have a good linking partner on his own team.
No one else on the full power category has Saiyan Roar, so you're not going to be able to get Super Saiyan 4 Goku's max potential on that team. In order to see his max potential, this is the team to do it on. They do have the same buffs, by the way. Both the full power team and the Shadow Dragon Art team 150. 2.7! Hello? Goodbye, Gohan! Whoa! Wait, people actually think that this guy is only okay. Holy shit. Goku, chill!
Like, he had a different name than Strength Percent for Goku, so it would have been cool if you could run them together on his team. Well, at least he was a sub-leader for the Super Tech type, so you could run Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta on his team if you wanted to. As for his kit, he was pretty crazy. He massively lowered defense on Super, which was pretty good at the time. He then had 100% attack at the start of turn and 30% chance of dodging and countering enemy super attacks, just like the other Percent 4s, along with the same crazy link set they all had. But what made him really stand out was that additional 70% attack and defense he had, depending on his HP. The more HP he had, the greater the boost. I always thought that buff was calculated separately, but apparently it's not. But even then, it was crazy. At full HP, that guy had 170% attack, so he was hitting pretty damn hard. Like, his numbers were still impressive even after the 4th year anniversary, from what I can remember. But yeah, some people weren't very happy with him, mostly because of his category. Like I said, it wasn't very good, and he also wasn't that much better than his strength counterpart. He barely did more damage and just had more defense, and people didn't really value defense as much at the time.
Now, the way I understand it, I did see some initial calculations from Mobile Man. I believe Tech Super Saiyan 4 Goku here, in order for him to out-damage the SCR Super Saiyan 4 Goku, your health has to be above 70%. As long as your health is above 70%, Super Saiyan 4 Goku's passive will be high enough that he will outdamage the SCR Super Saiyan 4 Goku. Now that might seem like a little bit of a sort of high restriction for a lot of you guys, but I don't think that's going to be very difficult to maintain at all on a lot of the teams he's going to be on.
His banner also came at a bad time on Global, since Dragon Ball Super Broly and Gogeta were right around the corner. So this was like a big skip for most people, especially after Super Saiyan Blue Evolution Vegeta, who was just like an all-around better unit. Goku also came with some new banner units. Strength GT Goku was pretty good for a banner unit. He had an immense damage multiplier, which was rare to see on regular banner units. He then had 120% attack and 30% defense on Super, plus 3 ki when facing one enemy, so he was just a solid card that could do a decent amount of damage for free, as long as you weren't facing like multiple enemies. Also, fun fact about this guy, he was supposed to have Shattering the Limit, but since people complained, they changed it to Fierce Battle, which was obviously way better. That's probably why he awakens from both story event and Dokkan event medals. In GT Cell, sealed on Super, had 80% attack and defense at the start of turn, and an additional 100% attack while also being effective against all types when the targeted enemy was stunned. That additional attack buff was calculated separately for a total boost of 260% attack when attacking a stunned enemy. So on paper, he was pretty cracked, but it was pretty hard to see his full passive active, since in most events enemies couldn't be stunned. I guess in SBR he could be pretty cracked, but he also didn't really have a team he could be run on, outside of like the Mono Extreme Int team, and since the friend system got reworked, it was like almost impossible to find an Int Kid Buu friend leader.
Now right now Cell doesn't have any categories too, so in order to use him at all, it's got to be on the Int team, which does really suck because no one runs Int leaders. So, like, if you get this Cell, like, sad to say, you're not going to be able to fucking use them. Like, unfortunately, people just don't run Int Kid Buu. Like, it's not even, no longer is it even like, oh, this cursed friend system. It's like, no, like, fuckers just don't run Kid Buu. They don't want to run Extreme Int.
He also, for some reason, had a 150% 12 ki multiplier, a Dokkan Fest level 12 ki multiplier, which was unusual to see at the time on a regular banner unit. Physical GT Frieza had a 30% chance of stunning the attacked enemy for 2 turns on Super, had 80% attack and defense at the start of turn, and an additional 100% attack, which was also calculated separately, as well as being effective against all types if the enemy's super attack was sealed. So he was clearly meant to be run within GT Cell. The problem is, the only meta team where you could actually run them together on was Strength Rose's team. A team that just had so many phenomenal options that it just wasn't really worth bringing those guys in, especially since most events didn't let you seal or stun the enemies.
But you guys kind of see what I'm talking about, how these units they're really fun, they're cool, but they're not really the most practical, right? I like that they're added to the game. Like, I prefer this type of unit. This is really, like, interesting, right? To actually have to put some semblance of strategy together, but unfortunately, the reward is not really, I don't want to say it's not high enough here. Let me get Turles out of here, by the way. It's just, you can't, like, really utilize their abilities effective, right? These units really would have been incredibly good, like, a year ago or 2 years ago, back when the bosses weren't immune to every single fucking little thing. Here is the Tech LR Ginyu Force, by the way.
But yeah, if they had a common category together, and if the category SBR stages were out, I'm sure they would have been pretty insane for the time. A cool thing about GT Cell and Frieza is that the free-to-play event brought free-to-play variants of those guys, so their super attacks were farmable. In free-to-play, GT Frieza was a pretty good free-to-play unit. He had a 30% chance of stunning the attacked enemy on Super for 2 turns, had 30% damage reduction, and give extreme class allies 2 ki and 25% attack and defense. That base kit was exactly what you wanted from a free-to-play unit at the time. A decent tank with some utility and support. But from what I remember, his drop rate was horrible, and his stats were also pretty low, so he wasn't as crazy of a tank as you might think. He was still a phenomenal free-to-play option for SBR. I actually used him to beat the Extreme Int stage for the first time. That stun, support, and damage reduction made him so good there. In GT Cell was also a decent free-to-play unit. He could seal on Super, gave extreme class allies 2 ki and 25% attack and defense, and recovered 7% HP at the start of turn. He was also a decent free-to-play option for SBR. I'm pretty sure I used him too to beat the Extreme Physical stage for the first time, since that seal on Super and support were just too valuable, and the healing wasn't half bad too. But unlike Frieza, this guy couldn't really tank there, so you had to be more careful. And I'll say it again, his drop rate was absolutely awful. AGL Hellfighter 17 lured attack on Super and had a 50% chance to dodge at the start of turn. That was also insane in SBR. Two abilities that were absolutely crazy in SBR. I used him to beat the Extreme AGL stage for the first time. I know I've said it for like the third time now, but those units were just too good in SBR, like, like they really were. And from what I remember, that guy linked pretty well with the other Extreme AGL androids. He shared 5 links with AGL Super 17. Strength GT Android 18 wasn't as good though. She raised Superclass Allies attack by 30% for 1 turn on Super, had 70% defense at the start of turn, and gained 70% attack for 3 turns after receiving an attack. So she was basically just stats, which was literally everything you didn't want a free-to-play unit to be, because their stats were just too low. So that girl was basically dead on arrival. I literally only farmed her after she got her Dokkan Awakening. Now, as for the banners, full power % for Goku's banner was pretty good, at least to me. It featured the 3 new banner units, who weren't bad, physical Omega texture % for Gogeta and Angel's % for Vegeta, who were still decent, but whose value literally showed up 2 weeks later with the introduction of the Shadow Dragon Saga Super Railroad stage. That stage was genuinely impossible if you didn't have those 3 units. I remember summoning on that banner hoping to pull a Super Saiyan 4 unit and just living with absolutely nothing. It was brutal. You know how everyone has that one unit they simply can't pull no matter how much they summon? Well, for me that unit is Tech Full Power % for Goku. I literally summoned on every banner this guy ever appeared on, and I never pulled a single copy of him. The only copy I have was the one I picked up with a Godstone. That's just crazy, bro. Like, I still have this guy at 55%. It's just ridiculous. Then we had the Tanabata banner, the first return of the 3rd year anniversary LRs. That banner, bro. So many memories. I had to wake up early for school the day it came out on Global, and I still remember clear as day dreaming about pulling Int LRs per Vegito the night before, only to wake up, summon, and get absolutely shafted. Like, bro, that banner was brutal. It was definitely not worth it on Global, with Gogeta and Broly right around the corner. But I just wanted the LRs per Vegito so badly that, bro, I just didn't care, bro. I didn't care. I literally dreamt about him. I can't even remember the last time I had a Dokkan related dream. Like, it's been so long, bro. 2 days later, and it was time for the 4th Dokkan battlefield, which came with a new battlefield LR. Int LR Middle Cooler was just an insane LR at the time. He led the extreme class type for 3 key and 70% HP attack and defense, pretty much like the leader skill of Strength Vegito Blue, but for extreme class. He then greatly lowered defense on his 12 key and raised extreme class allies attack by 30% for 1 turn on his 18 key, 2 pretty decent super attack effects. He then launched an additional attack that had a high chance of becoming a super attack, and he also had a high chance of launching an additional attack that could become a super attack. So this guy could potentially super up to 4 times within the same turn. Then he had up to 90% attack and defense, depending on the amount of HP he had. The more HP, the greater the boost, which wasn't bad considering all the healing his team had, plus what he got from his link set. Like, this was by far the best extreme class free-to-play LR, even on par with some summonable ones. He was just that good. The only downside with that guy was the fact that he was quite expensive, and Dokkan Battlefield wasn't as easy of an event as it is now. But if you had to spend your Battlefield currency on anything back then, it definitely would have been that guy. A couple of days later, the game hit top grossing, which made sense. Full power % for Goku was a pretty hype unit, and the Tanabata banner was a pretty good bait. So yeah, they gave everyone 30 stones, 3000 tech potential orbs, 20 character slots, and some other resources. 4 days later, and it was time for another EZA. Int Ultimate Gohan's EZA was actually pretty good. He now had an immense damage multiplier, which was insane combined with his attack stacking. Plus 5 key, 80% attack, and 40% defense when his key was 7 or more. Which meant that under a double 3 key leader skill, you basically couldn't miss a super with that guy. All you needed was 1 key sphere. So he was just so free to use. You could slap him on literally any team, which was a godsend for a newer player like me. He was actually one of the first units I EZA'd, and that passive helped me a lot when I didn't always have the most optimal teams. I knew I'd have like at least one character who would always super. But I'm speaking as someone who was still pretty new to the game at the time. If you were a veteran, this guy was probably one of the weaker Dokkan Fest EZAs around then. He still had a bad link set, and his buffs weren't as high as some of the other EZAs. Strength Ultimate Gohan was still seen by many players as the better unit, due to his higher starter friend attack buff and defensive support. According to the APT guys, Int Ultimate Gohan needed to super like 10 times before he could deal more damage than his Strength counterpart, since Strength Ultimate Gohan was also stacking on super. So if you didn't care about Ki, this guy was probably worse than his Strength counterpart. As for the Easy event itself, he was weak to the Majin Buu Saga category, one of the biggest categories in the game, and you could bring both super and extreme physical units. So yeah, this was definitely one of the easiest we had seen so far. If you had physical Super Vegito, it was just a breeze. And if you didn't, you could use physical Super Sentry Gotenks or LR Super Gogeta as a leader instead. Obviously it was still an easy, so not completely easy, like it was still a hard event, but it wasn't as tough as the previous ones. His easy banner was also not half bad. It featured physical final form Cooler and physical Goku Black, two units who weren't especially strong for this easy, but were pretty good overall. Well, Cooler was. Physical Goku Black, not so much, at least on JP. On Global, he obviously was way better. A week later, it was announced that Super Battle would be getting new stages, which was pretty exciting since the monotype stages were starting to age. 2 days later, and those new Super Battle stages were out. 10 new category stages, and let me tell you, they brought a whole new level of difficulty to the game. Unlike the first 10 stages of SBR, these new stages were centered around categories, meaning your enemies had multiple types. That meant you didn't have the same type advantage anymore, so units that could guard became way more valuable, and honestly defense in general became more important. The easiest stages were definitely the Peppy Girls 1 and the first 2 Super and Extreme Class stages, especially the Super Class stage, since you could cheese it with SR Chaozu and Jakku. Then you had some stages that were basically impossible unless you had all of the premium units that category offered, like the Shadow Dragon Saga stage. They also had to balance the Potara and Fusion stages by making them even harder, otherwise they would have been too easy obviously, because those categories were just so cracked. Well, the Potara stage was still fairly easy if you had all of the premium units, because that category was just broken beyond belief, but the Fusion stage, yeah, not so much. A lot of players had to wait for End Gotenks and Ghost before they could actually beat that stage, because the enemies were just hitting so hard, bro, and the Fusion category had no real tank, so you had to stun or seal them. The Majin Buu Saga category stage was also pretty tough, but it got easier over time. Like, the strategy was just to seal the enemies and counter with the Super Vegitos. And speaking of Super Vegito, this was when it became even clearer that Angel Super Vegito was the better one. In the Potara stage, physical Super Vegito could actually still take damage from normal attacks, while his Angel counterpart could easily tank them, which is crazy when you think about it. Like, physical Super Vegito could actually die from normals. It was crazy, but obviously they still both died to supers. The Hybrid Saiyan stage was basically an RNG fest with Strength Ultimate Gohan. It was always a coin flip whether he was going to guard or not, but the Hybrid Saiyan category got so many buffs over the years that it just became so much easier. The Resurrected Warriors category stage was probably one of the easier ones. Its weak link was literally the leader, but that wasn't even so bad since he debuffed the enemy's attack while also dealing a decent amount of damage. And bro, that Tapion rotation was just crazy there. They both lowered attack on super, so after a couple of supers you just couldn't take damage, and if you did, Angel Tapion would transform. Without him, I would have never beaten that stage, and probably for a long time. Finally, the hardest stage of them all.
Alright guys, name is Tyler aka Nanogenics, and today we are taking on what is unanimously from you guys, from other content creators across the entire community, the hardest thing currently to take on in all of Dokkan Battle, which is the Realm of God Super Battle Road stage. Even Battlefield 2.0, even with the latest stuff, all the other SBR stages, this one in particular is apparently the hardest thing that you could take on in all of in all of Dokkan Battle currently.
Realm of Gods. That stage was just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It was clear the Realm of Gods category was stacked, so the devs made sure that that stage was hard enough to be actually like challenging. Every battle had at least 4 different enemies, and those enemies hit so hard. So it was literally an RNG fest between Jiren's stuns and into UI Goku's dodges. UI Goku couldn't tank anything without items. I barely beat it almost a year later, and that was with some pretty good RNG. So yeah, it was rough. Like bro, that stage was still the hardest thing in the game almost like half a year later. It was probably not as difficult as the first SVR stages by then, since people kind of understood how the event worked, but it still sucked and it was just so painful. Like that stage was just not fun, bro. That's all I'm gonna say. That stage was just not fun. Thankfully, beating all of the stages gave you a pretty insane LR, and LR SBR Goku was just actually crazy. He had an insane leader skill, tricky and 100% HP attack and defense to all types, just absolute craziness. Then on his 12th key, he had a 20% chance of turning the attacked enemy for 2 turns, which was good in SBR. On his 18th key, he raised all allies attack by 30% for 1 turn, which was also good. He had a 30% chance to dodge at the start of turn, gave superclass allies 2 key and 30% attack and defense, plus an additional 20% attack and defense when below 50% HP. So below 50% HP, he was given 50% attack and defense to superclass allies. Like, this was just a crazy support type buff. And since he was int, you could just build him full dodge. So he was such a good utility unit and a great SBR unit. But obviously with how hard he was to rainbow, yeah, for a lot of players, he just wasn't good enough. And I guess understandably so. Those SBR stages were not easy at all, bro. Honestly, if you ask me, this guy should have probably just been the best unit in the game. Like, literally. Because you already did like all of the best units to beat all of those stages. They also brought back the Pepicles banner the same day, which had 2 new units. Tech Bula was pretty good. She greatly stacked attack on super, gave all allies Suki and 30% attack, and had a 20% chance to dodge, up to 50% per Pepicles category ally on the team. Like, bro, I don't even have to like elaborate more or spell it out for you. She was cracked. Like, a defensive ability plus support was and is still to this day like one of the best combo in the game. Strength Chi was also pretty good. She sealed on super, had 80% attack at the start of turn, and gave Pepicles units 2 key and 100% defense. I still remember saying that for the first time and just being like, what? 100% defense? Like, bro, that's just crazy. And I guess it was crazy. But then I remember watching one of Truth's videos where he said that yes, it's like OP, but not as OP as you'd think, because she's not a Saiyan character. Like, put this on a Saiyan for a Saiyan team and it would be like broken beyond belief. But the Pepicles category was still kind of like a meme category at the time. Like, it wasn't really a real team. So that combined with her low stats made it pretty balanced. A week later, they teased the next Dokkan Fest, which looked like a new Android 17. A couple of days later, and it was time for a new campaign, a Dragon Ball FighterZ campaign. It obviously had your typical Login bonus campaign, missions, a new banner, and a new story event. The Login bonus campaign wasn't anything crazy. It gave a total of 16 zones. Same for the missions. Like, compared to the Tanabata celebration, this was pretty underwhelming, but it was just a small campaign, so it was understandable. The next day, the new Dokkan Fest and story events were out. MVP 17 was just a goat. He introduced the androids category into the game, a category that was pretty good at the time. It wasn't anything crazy back then, but it had the potential to become really strong over time, since it literally had every android in it, including all of the cells. And bro, MVP 17 was such a goated unit that he just carried the whole team by himself. The guy lowered attack and defense on super, which was insane in SBR. Then he had 100% attack on super, which was also pretty decent, and he gave all allies 3 key and 60% defense. Like, bro, that was just so insane for a Dokkan Fest leader to have. This guy was basically just the defensive version of Turles. It was crazy, but he actually did more damage than Turles, at least pre-transformation. So this guy was actually just a better Turles at the time. And if you dropped below 77% HP, he had 40% damage reduction. So he was literally untouchable under that threshold. He literally had no flaws. Like, the only downside was maybe his links, but that wasn't even a real problem since he was given 3k and 60% defense to everyone. He also came with 2 new banner units. Tech Android 16 greatly raised his defense on super for 1 turn, which was obviously very good. Then he had 80% attack and defense at the start of turn, plus 30% defense up to 90% per androids category ally on the team. So yeah, with those stats and that defense on super, he could get pretty tanky. And on top of that, he had a high chance to guard. Sure, nowadays that might sound bad, but back then he could already tank without that guard, so it was more of like a cheer on top kind of thing, and not something he actually needed. Unlike someone like Strength Ultimate Gohan, who did need his guard in SBR to tank, but this guy could actually tank without the guard, but that guy was just a wall. Android 21 was a transforming unit, the first regular banner unit that could transform. She led the Android category for 3 key and 150% HP attack and defense, so she was a valid leader for that category. She also had an immense damage multiplier and recovered 10% HP on super, which was just crazy. Then she had 3 key and 90% attack and defense at the start of turn, and debuffed the attacked enemy attack and defense by 20%, which was really good in SBR. Like, she was already looking very solid in base, but then she had a 30% chance to transform when above 50% HP, starting from the 4th turn of battle. So yeah, another RNG transformation. Transform, she now lowered attack and defense on super instead of recovering HP, but she recovered HP at the start of turn, which was usually better. She also had 3k and 130% attack and defense, and disabled the enemy's guard on super. So yeah, she was good. As for the new story event, it brought a new free play unit, and Android 21 was an insane free play unit. She was a decent free play sub-leader for the Android category, recovered 7% HP on super, and gave Android category allies 2k and 30% attack and defense at the start of turn. And since she was int, you could just build her full dodge. She was easily one of the best free play units in the game, so I farmed and rainbowed her almost immediately. A cool thing about that story event is that it had clone versions of the Z fighters. They all had unique card arts and sprites in game, so people were speculating at the time that we could potentially see them as playable units in the future. But yeah, by now we know that it didn't happen, and I don't think it will, but honestly, who knows. Now, as for MVP 17's banner, it was pretty good. It featured the new androids, who were both very good. AGL Tapion, who was arguably still the best regular SSR in the game. The guy was just too cracked in SBR. AGL Super 17, who was actually now better than ever on MVP 17's team, because yeah, that guy had damage reduction, but no start of turn defense, something that MVP 17's support gave him. So yeah, the guy was just tankier than ever now. Strength Cell, who was starting to age but could still cook with that AoE spray attack and attack debuff in SBR, and Tech Cell, who was obviously a monster. But I think I skipped that banner on Global, because if I remember it correctly, he came before AGL Super Saiyan Blue Evolution Vegeta, and Super Saiyan Blue Evolution Vegeta was just a no-brainer for me. But MVP 17's banner was pretty cool if you were a new player, since you could literally just build a top-tier Android team just from the featured units alone. But yeah, this is it for today's history video. The next one is going to be a pretty big one. I could honestly see it be like an hour long, because we'll go over the $250 million celebration. Like, bro, that celebration was, I had just so many things. So stay tuned for that. But until then, take care. Peace.